Well, that's what I send the letter in. But that's my plan.
You don't have much time.
Thank you, brothers. We want to begin with an opening prayer, and I'll ask Archbishop Gomez to lead us in that prayer.
I don't know.
In the name of the Father, and Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
God of everlasting mercy, direct the hearts of your servants toward yourself, that we may keep your will faithfully in mind, and always do what is pleasing to you. Through the example of St. Francis Xavier Cabrini, deepen our concerns for the stranger, the sick, and all those in need, and may her prayers help us to serve Christ in all, especially the weakest and the most vulnerable. We ask this through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. In the name of the Father, and Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen. Thank you, Archbishop Gomez. I hope you all had good meetings, regional meetings, for the past 75 minutes or so. We move now into something with the Executive Committee. It's kind of an update on the implementation of third-party reporting. Brothers, a lot has transpired since we voted last June to establish a national third-party system to support the implementation of Vos Estis Lux Mundi. Since much of this is procedural and a bit complex, I have asked our General Counsel, Anthony Piccarello, to provide you with additional details and to field questions. So, Anthony, if you would.
Thank you, Your Eminence, and good morning.
Good morning, all.
I'm here at the request of the Executive Committee to provide an update on the status of the third-party reporting mechanism. I'll begin with a quick recap of what happened at the June meeting on this topic, and then relate the events from that meeting until today. Then there will be some time for questions. As Cardinal DiNardo mentioned, at the June 2019 Plenary Assembly, the body of bishops approved the establishment of a national third-party reporting system that would receive reports of certain misconduct by bishops described in Article 1 of Vos Estis Lux Mundi, and then channel those reports to the appropriate ecclesial authorities. The Plenary Assembly also committed to activate this reporting system no later than May 31st of 2020, which is the Holy See's deadline. It also authorized the executive and administrative committees to oversee the work of staff in that effort. Promptly, we as staff circled back with the three leading vendors of such services, obtained and evaluated bids from each of them, and proposed to the executive committee corresponding action items for decision by the administrative committee at its September meeting. The administrative committee in turn made three decisions. First, it authorized conference staff to enter into a single contractual relationship with the vendor to design and build the third-party system. Second, it approved the recommendation of staff regarding the vendor choice and priority. And finally, the committee decided on how the costs should be allocated following the precedent of the charter audit costs. Since that meeting in September, the staff has successfully negotiated and finalized a contract with Conversant, which is the first-ranked vendor of our three. That arrangement includes, among other things, direct billing from the vendor to the dioceses for their shares of the total cost of the system. In order to reduce administrative costs, each diocese is to be billed only once for an amount that covers the entire two-year term of the contract. On November 1st, we provided a heads up that these invoices would be coming soon, and by now, your offices should have received them. The contract also provides that the system could go live as soon as the very end of February 2020. This creates the possibility of activating the system well sooner than the Holy See's deadline of May 31st, 2020, ideally in March. The precise date hinges in turn on determining the earliest date by which all 197 dioceses and eparchies but especially the 32 metropolitans and the 32 corresponding senior suffragans, will be fully ready at the local level to receive and process the reports generated by the system. As that preparation will occur at the provincial level, we at the conference will be in touch with you at that level to determine whether there's a consensus date that we can find in March. So with that basic update on what's occurred, I'll be happy to take any questions you may have about the third-party system. I would note that I am not a canonist, and so I would like to avoid playing one on TV. So if you have questions that relate more broadly to the implementation of Vos Estis, I would ask that those would probably be better directed to our Office of Canonical Affairs separately, because of course the third-party system is just one small part of the broader Vos Estis system. So again, with that, I'd be happy to take your questions.
Do you have anyone posing questions at this point? I don't see Major. Yes. Bishop Conlon.
I'd like the President to know that I'm standing asking this question at the insistence of my Metropolitan, Cardinal Supich. Obviously, once this 800 number is advertised, we can expect people to use it to call in all sorts of concerns. For example, Father did not genuflect at the consecration this morning.
Right.
So how will all of those sorts of things be processed?
Right. Well, the short of it is that at the very earliest stages of providing a report through the system, there will be some basic filtering questions. For example, a very basic question is, does this complaint pertain at all to a bishop on the one hand as opposed to clergy or other staff of a diocese? This system is only about bishops. So if the answer is a simple binary yes, no, then it will basically filter out that question. Similarly, the scope is limited to the kinds of misconduct that's covered by Article 1 of Vos Estis. So it's not any complaint that anyone might have whatsoever about a bishop. It's only about specific forms of sexual misconduct and specific forms of misconduct in oversight. So there again, there are some ways to filter that. Now, as I'm sure you know, kind of in your own dioceses, complaints may come in about, you know, anything from, as we joke around, anything from homilies to haircuts, right? So if those systems are filtered out of the system, it doesn't mean the complaints disappear necessarily. They may just end up coming in as they ordinarily would. We redirect folks to the diocese, but if the system weren't there, then they would just call the diocese anyway. But the idea is we want to make sure that this system is reserved for this very specific, very high priority purpose.
Who's that?
Bishop Hartmeyer.
Bishop Hartmeyer.
We had a couple of questions regarding this procedure in our provincial meeting, and it dealt with communicating this information to our diocese, to the faithful. How do you recommend that we do it? Shouldn't it be uniform? And is there a possible chance that we could over-advertise it?
Well, I think there are a few things. First of all, I think as with all of the obligations associated with Vos Estis, they're principally located at the provincial level, and so that's something that to work out at that level. There is, you know, it's possible for the conference potentially to provide some resources that might be available for provinces to consider as they might publicize that. I don't know if I don't want to put them on the spot, but maybe at a later time you could be in touch with our or now our Chief Communications Officer James Rogers. But in general, I think, you know, on the one hand, we'll want to facilitate a good communication about this, and at the same time make sure it's left at the level of responsibility where it should be handled.
Thank you for your question, Bishop Hartmeyer. We are working on potential templates that would be available to you so you wouldn't have to use them, but built around a creative concept of a call to end abuse. Make 2 calls or a click, because you can report via the website, and that first call is to the local police or local authorities in the event a crime has been committed, obviously, and the second call is to this national hotline, which can help facilitate a good and proper response. It will have the necessary explanations behind it in terms of this doesn't replace regional or diocesan reporting mechanisms, and of course each diocese has in place a process of reporting for allegations against priests, and those remain in place and should be utilized. So thank you for your question.
Bishop McKnight.
Thank you, Your Eminence. I appreciate the limitation of the matter pertaining to bishops, but as we know, Vos Estis pertains also to religious superiors. How is that going to be handled with this?
I think the question about the relationship to religious is a bit complex and canonical, fundamentally. So whatever kind of canonical answers we get to those questions will be implemented in the context of the system. So it will sort of await a canonical determination.
Bishop Talley.
This was just for general questions for Vos Estis, yes, because it looks on the schedule that we have a discussion this afternoon on Vos Estis. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes? We have it for discussion. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Anthony, no, I don't see any. Thank you very much for your comments today. The metropolitan regions met this morning, and we certainly spoken. We know we have certain things to do, each in our metropolitan region. I would say it's incumbent upon the metropolitans to do our work very well, working with our suffragans and senior suffragans, so we can move ahead and have this obviously ready sooner rather than later is what the real intensity here is. If conversant and all are ready by February 29th, it would be good to be almost ready by then so we can proceed. I think our people are looking forward to this, having it, and we will need to work hard to do it. I want to recall to all the metropolitans and all bishops that the Conference of Bishops can be of some help here, but that's what they are, just of some help. We have to do it ourselves. This is not coming from the conference. This comes from metropolitans and from bishops working together. Okay. With that, I want to call Bishop Schultz and Favre on the ad hoc committee against racism for a report and discussion. Bishop Schultz.
Thank you, Your Eminence. My brother bishops, I'm happy and grateful for this opportunity to share with you the work of the Ad Hoc Committee Against Racism. As you are aware, it has been 1 year since the passage of our pastoral letter, Open Wide Our Hearts, the enduring call to love, and a little over 2 years since Cardinal DiNardo established the Ad Hoc Committee Against Racism. In this time, the committee has been hard at work as the Church works to acknowledge past harms and to cultivate racial reconciliation. Both an English and a Spanish version of Open Wide Our Hearts are available online for free download, as well as printed and bound copies for purchase. It is clear by the thousands of copies sold that the pastoral letter is being read and studied by many people. The Ad Hoc Committee began some of its most important work, its listening sessions on racism, in August of 2018 in St. Louis, Missouri. Open Wide Our Hearts states that we must create opportunities to hear the painful stories of those whose lives have been affected by racism. In these listening sessions, we have heard both the hurt that has been caused, as well as the hope that the church and society will now actively seek to root out the evil and sin of racism. Some participants at the listening sessions have shared painful experiences that they have shared with only a few others. And some have shared painful experiences that to that point they had only shared with God. The diocesan bishops have been present for the listening sessions, which provided a unique opportunity to connect to the lay faithful and the people of their communities in a way that opens new possibilities for further healing. The Ad Hoc Committee Against Racism is assisting dioceses that have held listening sessions with follow-up meetings and consulting with them on the implementation of the pastoral letter. Listening sessions have taken place in 13 dioceses across the country, and we are currently scheduling listening sessions for the year 2020. We've also been invited to conduct clergy study days and days with the laity in several dioceses. Those have also been wonderful opportunities to share the pastoral letter. All the offices and committees of the USCCB have been committed to ending racism. Accordingly, in early August this past year, conference staff met to discuss the ideas, plans, or initiatives of each conference department and secretariat for fulfilling the call of the pastoral letter. They will continue to reconvene periodically as they embark upon and they carry out these efforts. I would like to mention in particular the Department of Education and Outreach within Justice, Peace, and Human Development. We have initiated several projects in collaboration with them. Final touches are being put on a children's book, which is called Everyone Belongs, as a response to the pastoral letter. Also, the pastoral letter study guide was released on September 10th, 2019. All these resources and dozens of other resources for classrooms, catechesis, parishes, and individual study are available on our website at usccb.org/racism. As we seek wider audiences to spread the message of the pastoral, the Ad Hoc Committee has had a presence at and has addressed several national groups regarding the pastoral letter, including the National Federation for Catholic Youth Ministry at their annual gathering, the Voice and Vision Youth and Young Adult Ministry Conference, the National Association of Catholic Educators Conference, and the National Association of Catholic Church Personnel Administrators. The Ad Hoc Committee was also a key collaborator at the 2019 Catholic Social Ministries Gathering. The theme was Let Justice Flow, a call to restore and reconcile, with a focus on restorative justice. In the fight against the death penalty, which we know disproportionately impacts communities of color, the Ad Hoc Committee has worked with the Catholic Mobilizing Network to produce print articles in publications highlighting the dignity of human life from conception until natural death. Education is also a very important objective for the committee. we are engaging Catholic publishers in order to identify opportunities to translate the lessons from the pastoral letter into catechetical resources for Catholic schools and parish schools of religion. The Ad Hoc Committee, the Secretariat of Cultural Diversity in the Church, and the Secretariat of Catholic Education are continuing collaboration to improve how Native and Indigenous experiences and the experiences of people of African descent are taught in Catholic schools. The process envisions convening scholars to develop best practices and sharing them with superintendents, diocesan directors, publishers, and educators. We are also engaging college and university campus ministers regarding the pastoral letter, most recently at the University of St. Thomas's Center for Faith and Culture in Houston, Texas, as well as at Creighton University in Omaha. We're also working with the Catholic University of America to support their Do Justice Confronting Racism program during the 2019-2020 school year, aiming to foster conversations about race and ethnicity, as well as to support students of traditionally underrepresented groups. In addition, under the direction of the committee, we continue to consult with the USCCB staff to identify ways to support seminaries and houses of religious formation in achieving the vision of the pastoral letter. Staff of the Ad Hoc Committee met with the president of the National Association of Catholic Theological Schools this past summer to begin discussing these possibilities and to seek guidance on approaches that may work in collaborating with seminaries and houses of formation, on approaches that may work in forming seminarians and consecrated men and women to responsibly address racism as church leaders. As part of its charge, our Ad Hoc Committee regularly participates in several ecumenical dialogues that center on racism in faith-based contexts. For example, the committee participates in the quarterly Dialogue on Faith and Race, which we co-hosted with the Catholic University of America in partnership with the Baha'is of the United States. As part of the Justice, Peace, and Human Development Department at the conference, we continue to engage policy issues and consult with committees on domestic social development regarding legislation that impacts communities of color. In response to the immigration crisis at the southern border, Ad Hoc Committee staff participated in a pastoral encounter with migrants sponsored by the USCCB Secretariat on Cultural Diversity and the USCCB Department of Migration and Refugee Services. The encounter provided valuable insight into the legal, ethical, pastoral, political challenges ministers face in trying to serve our brothers and sisters there. In collaboration with the Communications Department of the USCCB, several members of the Ad Hoc Committee joined me in a videoed conversation about the pastoral letter. We discussed several important issues, such as the impact racism can have on evangelization, and modeling the type of real dialogue envisioned by the pastoral letter. The video will soon be widely available as the USCCB finalizes content sharing agreements with several media outlets. We will be actively looking to identify opportunities to communicate through social media our committee's work. As I come to the end of this presentation, I would like my brother bishops to know that the single cry that we hear most often at the listening sessions is that the laity never seems to hear homilies on racism. I would like to take this moment to ask you to work with me to change that perception so that we all will come to hear regularly and with one voice that racism is opposed to the gospel of Jesus Christ, and that the Catholic Church in the United States is committed to standing against the evil and sin of racism with all its strength. We will seek to provide more homily resources to bishops and priests for this purpose. Finally, with Jesus Christ as our guide, it is our hope that our efforts will aid all of us to embrace with renewed fervor the vision of the kingdom of God. The work of the Ad Hoc Committee Against Racism goes beyond simply calling out the evil of racism. It involves inviting and challenging people to see the deeper reality of God's purpose in creating all of us with unique and unrepeatable value. God's purpose to unite the whole human family as His one family. This is the source of our hope and the reason for our confidence that with God's grace, our efforts will bear fruit in these challenging times. I wish to thank very much the staff who assists with the Ad Hoc Committee, and Your Eminence, with that, I yield to comments or questions.
Thank you very much, Bishop Hepburn. Thank you. Brothers, do you have any comments, discussion? Archbishop Lucas?
Thanks, Bishop Fobb, for a great report, and thanks for the work of the Ad Hoc Committee. I especially appreciate your commitment to help us in our dioceses to bring the letter to life and the hope and the vision of the letter. It's a big commitment on your part to help facilitate these listening sessions. We've been to Omaha twice recently, so I'm very grateful. In the context of that listening session that I attended myself, I knew most of the people who were there, but I know them better now. They shared in a very generous way their faith, often in spite of discouragement and hurt, and that helps me be a better pastor to them and really to the whole diocese. So thanks so much for your investment in this and for the work of the Ad Hoc Committee.
Thank you, Archbishop, and thank you for your willingness to host a listening session.
Others? Bishop Shelton, I can say that Dave study at the University of St. Thomas in Houston produces ripple effects whenever you do a university setting. And although
Correct.
we want to go into the grassroots of parishes, settings at what I'd call senior middle management kinds of things on this are extremely important for getting out the letter and what it has done, since so many of our people aren't even aware of it. And this brings awareness. It was very well done because the resources and materials were well done.
Yes.
To help.
Thank you, Your
Thank you, Bishop Shelton. Anyone else who would like to comment on it? Okay. Thanks to you and the committee for long work and still working.
Thank you very
so much. We now move to Catholic Relief Services and a report on CRS's progress supporting the global church. Bishop Gregory Mansour will be on this, and also Sean Callahan, the president and CEO of CRS.
Thank you, Cardinal DiNardo. Brother bishops, usually meetings and talks are rather boring, but today and yesterday and the day before, I've really been edified by the work of my brothers. I heard Bishop Barron's suggestion that we begin our outreach to those who are not quite sure about their Catholic faith. Begin our outreach with works of justice. I heard Archbishop Naumann's efforts and the Pro-Life Committee to make every parish in America a place where a woman afraid and troubled by an unplanned pregnancy can find shelter. We heard today Bishop Fab's beautiful work in the listening sessions on racism, and Archbishop Gomez's efforts on immigration, and of course, Pope Francis's tireless efforts and his encouragement to us to make the church a field hospital. May I now add CRS's efforts. Catholic Relief Services, from my experience, has been one of the finest Catholic agencies anyone could ever serve. We're Catholic to the core, training our 6,700 employees throughout the world, whether they're Catholic or not, on all the tenets of Catholic social teaching. Our efforts at safeguarding are thoroughly Catholic, with a zero tolerance in place, along with a whistleblower program and a careful policy. The grants we apply for at CRS to serve, whether from large donors, from the U.S. government, the Global Fund, are vetted to be sure that we do not agree to do anything against Catholic teaching as we serve the poorest of the poor. And we have that same fidelity to all of those people who give either in a second collection for CRS or Operation Rice Bowl. Our efforts overseas are seen as among the finest examples of a morally based Catholic agency. Nonetheless, we are seen as a bit strange by some international agencies that serve the poor, because we believe that serving the poor is just that, not eliminating the poor by abortion or contraception, but by truly serving them in all their human dignity. Thus, we come to you today, brothers, to strengthen our outreach to the poor overseas, and we hope to do this by strengthening our own efforts here at home. To our 17,000 Catholic parishes or mission centers, our hundreds of Catholic colleges and Newman centers, and our thousands of high schools and grade schools. Rice Bowl is already a central theme in most of our growing up, in most of our parishes and schools, but CRS's work with the youth and with young college students and high school students is even much more than this, and we have so many ways to engage our youth. We hope to do even more. Young people, and I think most people, long for a life worth living, and CRS can be one more noble Catholic effort to satisfy this longing to serve. Jesus himself told us that as long as we did it for one of the least of his brothers or sisters, we did it for him, and so we serve. Please take a moment to review our little information report that was in your packet today, as well as we have the grace of being the last report in this green booklet. You'll find even more information on CRS's efforts, really on your efforts. And so I thank you, brothers, and I have the joy of serving CRS in your name. And so I introduce Sean Callahan, a fine example of a man of service and the president of CRS.
Thank you, Bishop Mansour, and thank you, Your Eminences, Excellencies, fathers, sisters, and friends. CRS has received tremendous support from the conference, from the Secretariat, and as you can see from the picture behind me, from our chairman who has served 7 years. And so I'd like to recognize the great work that Bishop Mansour has done around the world representing CRS. I'd also like to recognize and thank all of our board members and our board alum, because they continue to stay connected to the great work that the Catholic Church is doing to support our brothers and sisters around the world. But I'm here today not just to thank you, but as Bishop Mansour said, to ask for more. In this world that we live in today, we often find that it is divided and broken. And we look for ways that we as a church can lead the way or assist others in finding a way that they can lead. And as I go around the world and around the country, I see a yearning for people to want to join in activities, to want to do things. And I think we as a church have to start reflecting on how can we provide them with greater assistance for them to lead the way.
Lead the way by believing that you can make a difference. Believe that the world needs you. Believe that your faith needs you. Believe that you, as a follower of Christ, have the power to connect, to change, to lead. Together, we are building a movement of Catholics through and with the Church. A movement that children and their families are depending on this very minute. A movement that is growing 1 or 5 or 100 people who share a vision of love and service into millions. For him, for her, for them, for you. Answer God's call. Go take the first step. Do what it takes to address the root causes of poverty, social injustice, violence, and hunger. Love your brothers and sisters by upholding human dignity for each person. And let's not stop until all of God's children can take their futures into their own hands and walk a path to peace and prosperity. Lead the way. Believing is serving.
I ask that we all reflect and take some opportunities to think about how we can help children share the energy and joy that they have in the passion, how we can reach out to our priests and deacons and help them to provide guidance and inspiration for the Catholic community in the United States and link it to the Catholic community overseas. How we can help to advocate for the causes that the Church represents. We heard yesterday from Archbishop Gomez about the Committee on Migration, and we're doing that with Catholic Charities, with MRS, with the Bishops' Conference and others, advocating for migrants that come into our country. And in addition to that, service, reaching out to people around the world. Similarly, in the case of migrants, we know that Catholic Charities and MRS reach to people in the United States. Catholic Relief Services, we work overseas to help people not to have to migrate. We try to help people, pull them out of gangs and assist them. We help safe houses throughout Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico. We also reach out to people and try to provide livelihoods for them as we move forward. I would like to leave you with one face and one story. And it was a woman that I met in a small village in India. Her name was Rita. And I met her after a program, and Rita came up to me and said, I am blessed to have HIV and AIDS. And I looked at her in a strange way, and she said, you probably wouldn't understand. I was a 15-year-old girl who was married to an older man who looked sickly. A year later, he was dead, and I had HIV/AIDS. I was then thrown out of the house I was in because I was infected as well. But she said, now, HIV/AIDS has given me the opportunity to advise others and to counsel others. HIV/AIDS has actually allowed me to save lives. And so someone like Rita, who people might have thought would be thrown away, was giving of herself to help other people. And so I ask us to come together to think of how we can help more people like Rita, how we can lead with our Catholic values and assist people so that Rita's light can shine to others so the good works are heard. Thank you.
Do we have time for questions or thoughts? Or
Sure. Anybody
Yes.
have any questions,
Brother Bishops?
observations from the brothers, bishops, to Bishop Mansour or Sean?
Bishop Navarez.
Bishop Navarez.
Thank you, Bishop Mansur, for your beautiful work. My question would be, there's certain religious communities like the Jesuits that have a program designated for young volunteers to help them in their mission. Does CRS have any kind of youth volunteer program to help you in, or help us in the mission?
Yes, with me and with Sean is Paul and Bill and Roberto. Maybe one of them might want to talk a little bit about that. The difficulty, Bishop, is that the CRS really works with the people on the ground to cultivate the relationships. And rather than give a fish, they teach to fish. And so we don't have many opportunities for youth to go to do that kind of work, but there are several internships that are offered, and maybe someone can talk about that.
Sure, thank you. It is one of those struggles that we have in bringing people overseas. We have been finding that the church in many of the countries in which we work is becoming stronger and stronger, and they want to do their own work with a little bit of assistance. And so what we're doing is outreach here in the United States to try to help people to provide that assistance here by advocating, by working in the United States to link and support them. But we currently don't have, as the Jesuits do, or Maryknoll, a volunteer program that goes overseas.
Any other comments?
And just to add to that also, one of the great things that CRS does that very few other INGOs do is that we capacity build. And so we're constantly building the capacity of the Caritas or the Catholic Charities in those local countries, and it's mostly their youth. For instance, in Lebanon, 4,000 volunteers, and CRS helps the local Caritas to cultivate those volunteers. But it is something that we're trying to think about how we could engage more youth.
Archbishop Broglio, followed by Bishop Habash.
Given that just last week I was in Burkina Faso and Niger on behalf of CRS, I would just like to underline the tremendous work that is being done there and work with the population responding to problems of internal migration and also capacity building in both of those countries, which are both very, very poor. And it is tremendous the difference that CRS is making. And it's really a pleasure to see that work being done firsthand. So thank you very much for all that you do, all that CRS does.
Bishop Habash.
As the bishop is coming up, I'd just like to thank Archbishop Broglio. One of the key things in Niger and Burkina Faso is they wanted to connect with the U.S. conference, and Bishop Broglio was nice enough to accept our invitation to join. But the conferences in the countries that we work would like to unite with the U.S. conference, and so any opportunities that we have to connect them are very important for those local conferences.
My question is about 2 or 3 African countries. They never been mentioned in the Conference of the Catholic Bishops, especially the last month or 2 past months. They were victims of very severe persecution, like Ethiopia. Last month, 68 people were killed while they were in the churches. Several churches were burned out. Algeria, last month, 13 churches been closed and burned out. Although these countries were the cradle of the first Christianity in Ethiopia, and they are victims of the poverty. More than this, the Coptic Church, the Egyptian Christianity, they are really suffering from very severe Christianity, and nobody mentioned about them. They are persecuted, they are under the poverty more than we are in Iraq or in Syria. This is my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop Habash, for that intervention. It is true. Even in Etria, I remember when I read the news that they nationalized almost all of the Catholic charitable organizations in the country just overnight. And I contacted Sean about that. The tragedy of religious freedom is something huge, and it has to be. We try our best to address it, but between the conference and CRS and Aid to the Church in Need and Knights of Columbus, these are the people who can raise their voice, but we have to do more.
Archbishop Naumann, followed by Cardinal Tobin.
I just want to thank you, Bishop Mansour, for all that you've done to protect the integrity, and not just you, but Sean and all the staff, and you're listening with respect to those who bring complaints, and I know sometimes that can be difficult work, but thank you for all that you've done to protect the Catholicity of what we're doing, and I just applaud your great work. Thanks.
Cardinal Tobin.
Thank you. In fact, it has been the board of directors and the staff itself is very conscious of everything. And so we've been listening to anybody who has any criticism, trying to see if there's some validity to it. And if it is, we deal with it. If there's not, we tell them, please, we've vetted this, we've looked at it, and we're at peace with it.
Thank you, Cardinal, and thank you, Bishop, for the fine report, and Sean. I would just like to mention that the members of the Subcommittee for the Church in Africa, when we visit particular countries, we almost always liaise with the work of CRS. And so we have witnessed firsthand the important and crucial impact. We also hear from the bishops' conferences, since we do always interface with the bishops' conference, their appreciation for the work of CRS. And we're going to continue to try and expand, as the Solidarity Fund expands, our service in Africa. But there are also opportunities like those represented by Archbishop Broglio, who attended the Continental Congress for Africa, SICAM, last summer, as well as that important visit to Burkina Faso and Niger.
No other questions?
And thank you, Eminence, for your good work with the Church in Africa, too.
Any? Archbishop Laurie?
Just also, of course, I'm delighted that CRS is here in Baltimore. It's a great honor that this is in this local church, but I also want to thank you for the parish engagement program. I think it's a wonderful way in which parishioners can become aware of the needs and challenges of brothers and sisters in very different circumstances and participate by prayer and sacrifice in the work of CRS. So just a word of thanks and support for that important program.
Okay. Any concluding remarks, Bishop Mansour?
Just a closing remark. You see a smile on my face when I come up here. Usually when we come up here, we're supposed to be in fear and trepidation, but it's really, I cannot tell you what a joy it is to serve CRS, and CRS is it's the, people know, they might not know too much about people in America, but they know CRS. I often say, what's wrong with the world? There's plenty. What's right with the world? Groups like CRS. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, CRS and Sean. Thank you, Bishop Mansour, who for these past years have been chair. I'm grateful to you for your works. You certainly have made CRS, as they say, ecumenical oikonomia. The whole world is your household, and you do that work. So CRS, thank you. God bless you all. I would now like to invite Bishop Zubik and Sister Donna Markham, President and CEO of Catholic Charities USA, come forward for a presentation.
Thank you, Cardinal Donardo and President-elect Archbishop Gomez, all of my sisters and brothers here in the room this morning. My brother bishops, as your liaison to Catholic Charities USA, it is my pleasure to express verbally our welcome to Sister Donna Marie Markham, President and CEO of Catholic Charities USA. Since Sister Donna began her service to Catholic Charities, she has, as the expression goes, paid forward the presence of the Church through Catholic Charities. When national disasters turned people's lives upside down, Catholic Charities was one of the first responders of the Church. As the issue of immigration maintained center stage and needs the perspective of Jesus and the gospel, CCUSA is there as another voice of the Church. Those contributions last week were recognized by the nonprofit Times in noting that Catholic Charities is ranked number 3 in the size, public support, and scope of its charitable work, third only to the YMCA and Goodwill. Since assuming her position in 2015, Sister Donna has come before us in each of our fall meetings to give us an update on the work of Catholic Charities USA. And today she's going to brief us on a very exciting initiative that addresses the housing crisis in the U.S. and a creative way of engaging our Catholic community. Catholic Charities currently operates approximately 35,000 units of affordable housing, in addition to emergency shelters and temporary housing. More units are underway as I speak. While many organizations are focused on the development of affordable housing, very few want to take on the task of the hard-to-house, chronically homeless people who are living on our streets. For all of us who are gospel-driven leaders in the Church, these are exactly the people we need to serve. And so won't you please welcome Sister Donna.
Well, it is a delight to be with you, and I thank you very much for inviting me to give you a little bit of an update on the work of Catholic Charities over the past year or so. We had a wonderful breakfast this morning where we talked about the migration, the humanitarian crisis at the border. And in the interest of time, I can't say a whole lot about that because of our agenda, but just to say that Catholic Charities in the last 12 months has helped over 300,000 people who have crossed into this country. Our hats go off to the 19 Catholic Charities agencies along the southern border, and we also, which you may not know, is that the northern border is also being affected. So our agencies around Maine and in New York are being affected as well. And all of the Catholic Charities agencies are receiving people from the border in your own dioceses. So thank you to all of you for extending your help, your compassion to them. But now to talk about a really exciting thing that's happening. About 3 years ago, we did a survey of all of our members to find out what were the strategic priorities we ought to be focusing on. One of the ones that surprised me, to be very honest, and it came across as the strongest one across the entire country and the territories, was that of affordable housing. So we took that on. Migration and refugees were right up there, and then the housing one was everywhere. So we did a deep dive into this issue and tried to look at what do we need to be doing to answer that question of who is most in need of our help. And as Bishop Zubik indicated, it's really, in this arena, it's the hard to house, the chronically homeless people. Most organizations want nothing to do with the chronically homeless because they're addicted, they have mental health issues, they have all kinds of physical conditions, and people don't want them in their facilities. There's a lot of NIMBYism, and they're very difficult to find the right way of housing them. So we decided that that's exactly the space where Catholic Charities needs to be, addressing those who are the very most vulnerable that nobody else wants to address and take care of. So, with the experience and expertise of some of our most successful Catholic Charities agencies, we developed a unique collaboration between Catholic Charities, dioceses, and Catholic Health Partners. And we are also working with national strategic partners, impact investors, city, county, state, and federal governments to really look at what we can do to address the needs of these people. This initiative actually is providing solutions to 3 big problems. The first is, of course, to provide the chronically homeless with a path toward reclaiming their rightful dignity. Everyone needs a safe place to sleep. They need to be able to have their food inside. They need to be able to use restrooms inside and not on the streets. So that's the first. The second is that this is reducing healthcare costs related to frequent readmissions to our emergency departments and medical overutilization. We call those in healthcare the frequent flyers. The consequences of some of our people who actually live in hospitals. In Chicago, one gentleman told me that he spends 1 week at Mercy Hospital, another week at Jackson Park Hospital, another week at University of Chicago Hospital, and another week, I forget the 4th hospital. So he's got the month covered, and he signs himself into the psych unit. That is a horrible way to live. It's escalating healthcare costs. It's not a dignified way to live. So this partnership with Catholic Health is reducing healthcare costs enormously. The third problem that we're trying to solve is to look at how can we repurpose vacant or underutilized church properties, how can we turn those into revenue-generating social ventures directed for caring for the very most vulnerable, and then thereby reduce the need for the church and religious congregations to continue to alienate property. Because we don't know what's going to happen once that land is gone. You know, we want to be able, we can't get it back so easily, but we don't know what's going to happen 100 years from now. So how about taking that, repurposing it, figuring out a way to do this that will actually turn it into revenue generation. That is happening. So I want to just, I love this diagram because we see the chronically homeless on the streets, and then there are all the hidden issues. And we know that in order to be successful in helping the chronically homeless people, we have to look at their health problems, their behavioral health problems. We also know that there's a high morbidity rate. They die on the streets. Many of them die on our streets. And as I mentioned before, the overutilization driving up healthcare costs. So here's what we're trying to do. The goals of this initiative are to reduce chronic homelessness by 20% in 5 pilot cities over 5 years, decrease the hospital readmissions rate of that population by at least 25%, and third, connect 35% of these folks with primary care and behavioral health care providers. Now, This is underway. We have 5 pilot cities, 5 dioceses that we are working with. We went through a vetting process of how we would determine our pilots. These pilots are underway at various stages. The selection criteria were, first of all, that there was access to surplus church property in poor areas. We need it in the worst areas of the town. We don't need it in the marginal suburbs, because that's not where the homeless folks are. Then that the bishop or archbishop was supportive of this housing initiative. Then that Catholic Charities Agency in that diocese had the expertise in housing and health care and case management. And then fourth, that the Catholic Health System partner was in the area and willing to collaborate with us in providing the wraparound healthcare services, while Catholic Charities provided the wraparound behavioral health and all the supportive services. So those were our criteria. We are thrilled to say that Spokane actually is our poster child for how to do it. Our other 4 sites are all underway as we are garnering the resources, the financial backing, et cetera. It's a lot of blended financing that we're doing to make this work. So that is, all right. All right, so this is, we have the largest health systems in the country are working with us, the 5 giants. We are starting with Catholic Health Partners because we are mission aligned. Catholic Health has made a strong pledge to serve those most in need, and we've got those folks that we want to help, and we're aligned and we're working together to make this happen. Catholic Charities does the case management. We've done a lot of research. Most of these projects fail for the chronically homeless because they lack wraparound services of case management. So we have all sorts of things put in place so that these people really know that they're cared for, and we help them before the situation lands them back on the streets. We also are working with the health partners to dedicate a portion of our existing shelter beds for homeless respite care. What's happening in the hospitals is that the homeless folks can't be discharged because they're too fragile to just turn them out on the streets, so they're staying longer in the hospital. One of the hospitals we were talking with, a person had been in the hospital for 78 days. Now you know what that's doing, uncompensated charity care. So if we had a way to help that by putting medical services into some of our designated respite shelter beds, it reduces cost and also helps that person. Then in the meantime, we find them permanent supportive housing. So we're working at CCUSA to establish a pre-development loan fund. We're also providing ongoing consultation. We've opened doors for national collaborators. We're engaging in national advocacy and providing access for the dioceses and the Catholic Charities agencies to get funding sources. Spokane, this is just to show you the cost of one homeless person is estimated to be $250,000 a year. They are now spending $8,000 a year. So to reduce from $3,200 a night in a hospital versus $140 in jail to $11.22 a night in permanent supportive housing. That's saving Providence St. Joseph Health System in Spokane $19 million a year, and is providing dignity for that human being who has beforehand been living in a terrible way. So it works. So I want you to see this. This is what we pitched to our funders.
These are the faces of the chronically homeless in our community. At Catholic Charities, we believe that every human being is made in the image and likeness of God. Every person deserves a place to call home. Chronic homelessness is both a cause and a result of poverty and of poor health. We can't guarantee an end to chronic homelessness, but we will never stop offering the solution. Our solution means that everyone has a pathway to permanent, supportive, and healthy housing. The largest provider of housing and social services in the U.S., other than the state itself, is Catholic Charities. The largest provider of medical services in the U.S., other than the state itself, is Catholic Healthcare. Imagine what would happen if they joined together to address the problem of chronic homelessness. Catholic Charities USA's Healthy Housing Initiative seeks to do just that. By developing surplus church property and new construction into affordable housing and partnering with healthcare providers to provide comprehensive care through wraparound services, we believe we can accomplish our three main goals by the end of 2026: to reduce chronic homelessness by 20% in 31 cities, lowering hospital readmission rates by 25% in those cities, and connecting 35% of those housed with primary and behavioral health care. That's our solution to solving chronic homelessness in the U.S.
So you saw the 5 pilot cities. We have 31 additional cities that we've identified that we have not disclosed because we have to wait till we get the results from the pilots. And we also have to build the funding. So some of your dioceses may be on that list, and some of you may want to be on that list. Call me up, okay? So then we've made this a very, very strong strategic priority right now. I think as Catholics, we have a good story to tell. We have an opportunity to combine our resources, our services, our efforts to do something that's really transformative for people who are poor and homeless. And we are thrilled to be able to partner both with our Catholic organizations and our various other partners in this initiative. So it is a great story to tell. We are thrilled to be able to be part of it, and you can pray that funders decide that this is really an important thing to fund, okay? So we're going after some real serious funding with this, and are so proud that we as a church can do something wonderful for some of the poorest of the poor among us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sister Donna. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks, Bishop Zubik. Thanks, Donna. Thanks, Catholic Charities, for all the good work you do. It's great. Thank you. I think we're at time frame. We'll move on now. If we can bring on Catholic Legal Immigration Network Clinic, Bishop Van. Are you?
Dear brothers in the Lord and all present here today, on this feast day of St. Francis Cabrini, I really am grateful to be here as the chair of the board of Clinic. For 30 years, the Catholic Legal Immigration Network Incorporated Clinic has helped us and other nonprofit organizations to provide immigration legal services to our parishes and institutions for religious workers and their visa challenges, and legal services to low-income immigrants and their families. Some of you may remember that under the leadership of then Monsignor DiMarzio, who headed Migration and Refugee Services, the Conference of Bishops founded a clinic in 1988 in response to the urgent needs of millions of people for immigration legal services after the passage of the 1986 Immigration Reform and Control Act. As a pastor back in Illinois, I found their help invaluable then. Clinic has steadily grown from a handful of diocesan programs to now 380 affiliates in 49 states and the District of Columbia. Think of that growth. The network employs as well over 2,300 staff who provide immigration legal services to hundreds of thousands of low-income immigrants and their families each year.
and they still continue to assist our parishes and our institutions with the increasingly complex matter of visas, work permits, and green cards and citizenship in the continuing necessary ministry of religious and priests who come to us from around the world. I have had the pleasure of serving as the chair of the board for Clinic these past 6 years, during a period in which the work and mission of Clinic has become ever more essential. Truly, working with Clinic has been one of the greatest blessings of my life and ministry. I was privileged and blessed to work with Gene Atkinson as executive director for the first time, my first part of the time as the chair of the board. And now I'm blessed as well to introduce to you Clinic's new executive director as of February this year, Anna Marie Gallagher. Anna came to Clinic most recently from a private immigration practice involving the legal profession, certainly, but one of pastoral care and education and conviction on her part as well. She brings an impressive background in immigration and human rights work. She also, as well, brings a personal background of her family because they immigrated to our country from Donegal in Ireland. I would like Anna Marie to update all of you on Clinic's most recent urgent response to the current moment of crisis and challenges for our immigrant population, so many of whom we know, minister to, and who live among us, often in the shadows. I'm grateful to present to you Anna Marie Gallagher.
Thank you so much, Bishop Van, for your very kind words and for your 6 years of leadership of Clinic. I'd also like to take this time to acknowledge our board members in the room, and if the bishops on our board could stand up. I think it's important to acknowledge their leadership and work as well. Thank you. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to be here and to share information on Clinic's work, and especially about our project at the border in Juarez. Clinic trains and supports immigration legal services agencies across the country. We advocate for humane immigration policies. We provide legal representation to immigrant religious workers, many in your diocese. We also support naturalization and integration, including with a project through the Catholic Campaign for Human Development to help train immigrant leaders in combating poverty. As Bishop Van said, I came to Clinic after a career that brought me to Guatemala, Spain, Ireland, and back to the United States. As the child of immigrants from the west of Ireland who arrived here with next to nothing, I grew up with stories and songs about exile and separation. And I understand why people leave their homes. Despite poverty and limited formal education, my parents arrived with many resources: hard work, faith, resilience, and a deep commitment and respect for family and community. They taught my brothers and me to love this country as so many before them and after them have done. Upon joining Clinic in February, I visited the border to assess the situation there in anticipation of our work, and also to represent a separated mother from Honduras in her deportation case. Even with my long experience in sending and receiving countries, I had never seen the misery and desperation like that experienced by thousands of men, women, and children, asylum seekers at our southern border. I saw a world that is hard to understand and accept, given our country's resources and our values. I saw people crowded into shelters with inadequate food and sanitary services. I met a 25-year-old Guatemalan woman with a 5-year-old daughter who had fled beatings and abuse at the hands of her ex-partner. On a street in Tijuana in the late spring of this year, a man tried to steal her little girl from her. I saw hundreds of Mexicans who had fled cartel violence, living on the streets, waiting for a turn to ask for asylum. When I accompanied a group of them to the port of entry, we were shouted at and ridiculed by a Customs and Border Protection agent. The oldest in this group of 18 people was 24, and the youngest only 2 months old. They all had fled violence in their hometowns and could not return. More than 60,000 men, women, and children are being forced by this administration to wait for months in Mexico before they can ask for asylum in the United States. Human rights organizations and the press regularly report on the dangers these men, women, and children face every day while they wait. Our government is violating international law and U.S. law, which states that a person fleeing persecution who arrives at our border should be admitted and permitted to apply for asylum in the United States. Asylum applicants can be detained after entry if they pose a threat or a flight risk. Otherwise, they can and they should be released to the support of family, community, and access to counsel while they await final decisions in their cases. With the encouragement of Clinic's board, our border bishops, and many of our partners, this summer we started a new project in Ciudad Juarez, the Estamos Unidos Asylum Project, to respond to the urgent needs of those stranded in Mexico. There should be a flyer in your packets about this project. We provide legal support to people applying for asylum and waiting for their hearings and interviews in the United States. Our staff and volunteers from our network and beyond present Know Your Rights presentations. We do legal consultations. We explain to the migrants what options they have and what rights they have. We also represent some in immigration court. In Ciudad Juarez, no 2 days are alike. The practices employed by the Customs and Border Protection agencies differ from day to day. Processing times vary. There is no standard procedure to admit the Mexicans, asylum seekers. They simply wait on the streets, sleeping on sidewalks with their children, in the hopes that CBP will permit a small number of them to enter the United States on any given day. In Ciudad Juarez alone, there are 16,000 plus migrants who are waiting to seek protection in the United States. Clinic and HIAS are the only 2 organizations that are providing ongoing U.S. asylum legal assistance to the migrants. We have had 30 volunteers with us during these past 2 months, and we are in the process of building a strong volunteer corps. As you can imagine, this is just a drop in the bucket. We can only represent a very, very small percentage of the people that need help. By its actions, this administration has essentially eliminated asylum at our border, especially for poor Black and brown people. Without skilled counsel, thousands of migrants will lose their cases, be deported, and face grave danger, even death, in their home countries. The border is not the only place where the dignity and rights of migrants are being threatened. Nationwide, millions of low-income immigrants are in critical need of legal assistance to help them keep their families together. You know this. You see this in your parishes and in your social services programs. They are rightly worried about the loss of TPS and DACA. They are terrified of workplace raids. They fear being deported after any interaction with the police. And they face the always looming possibility of having their families broken apart. Despite all of this bad news, I also see much hope when I visit our affiliates. They do an astonishing amount of life-saving good work with extremely limited resources. They accompany thousands of men, women, and children as they encounter ever-changing immigration policies. They are created and driven to help as many people as they can, wherever they can. I'd like to close, bishops, by making a few simple requests. Visit your local clinic affiliate. Most often, that will be the Catholic Charities Immigration Legal Services program in your dioceses. Your presence will lift them up. It will lift their spirits as they swim against the tide. I have to say that one of my big concerns as the leader of clinic is care for our staff and our affiliates and their networks. Your presence means a lot to them. If you don't have a legal services program in your diocese, we can help you start and build one. Speak out and make sure that your community knows that you are there to accompany them in their often agonizing immigration struggle. I'm very grateful for Cardinal DiNardo's comments on Monday about the time that he spent at the border. Such interactions are always welcome and eye-opening. Finally, thank you so much, and once again, for having the foresight and wisdom to create Clinic. Thank you for standing with us and with the immigrants in your communities. I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you, Anna Marie. Thank you very much. I hope you have continued. Oh, we have one question. Where?
Bishop Stowe.
Bishop Stowe, is your hand up?
Not so much a question, but thank you, Ms. Gallagher, for making it so clear the crisis that has been in many ways created by this administration and its policies, and why it's so important that the church is there accompanying migrants and working for those who are seeking asylum. I'm really afraid after our discussion yesterday about faithful citizenship that many people will exploit the words of that document to be seen as supportive of the Trump administration and labeling it as a clearly pro-life administration. I think it's important to see this as a life issue, and the status of our people coming across and seeking asylum is, as you pointed out very well, illegal both nationally and internationally. Thank you for calling that to our attention, and thanks for being the presence there where it's most needed.
Thank you. Thank you, Bishop Stowe. I'd also like to thank you so much for your op-ed piece that you recently did. That means a lot to Clinic, to the affiliates, and to the people who we serve. Thank you.
Bishop Mum.
And then Soto. Yes, where does the funding for Clinic come from again?
We receive funding support from the church. We also receive funding from grants and donations.
Bishop Soto.
I want to thank the wonderful work of Clinic, and I've had the opportunity to attend the convenings when you pull the whole network together, and it's just an extraordinary cadre of young men, of men and women, many of them young, many of them immigrants themselves and refugees, and it's just a wonderful testimony to the work of the church. But I also want to highlight the good work that Clinic does with regards to religious visas in a climate which, I mean, you know, our religious and clergy don't have to suffer just the miserable indignities of the immigrants and refugees on the border, but it is becoming so difficult now, even for religious to be able to come into the country, and Clinic is just such a great support to the mission of the church, and I just want to highlight that.
Thank you, Bishop.
Thank you all. Thanks. Okay. Thanks, Bishop Zubik. Thanks, Anna Marie Gallagher. I'd like to call Bishop Gregory Parks, along with Jean Kelly, President of the National Council of Catholic Women, for a brief presentation about their 100th anniversary.
Brothers, for the past 3 years, I have served as the Episcopal moderator or liaison to the National Council of Catholic Women. Next year, the NCCW will celebrate the 100th anniversary of its founding by the U.S. bishops. I'd like to invite Jean Kelly, the current president of the NCCW, to come forward. She's going to address our assembly as well as show a brief video and extend an invitation to us to participate in the centennial celebration, which will take place next August in Washington, D.C. Please join me in welcoming Jean to our assembly.
Thank you, Bishop Parks, Your Eminence, Your Eminences, Excellencies, and distinguished guests. It is such a great honor for me to address you on behalf of the members of the National Council of Catholic Women. As Bishop Parks mentioned, our NCCW is celebrating our centennial in 2020, as it will soon be 100 years since the American bishops called for our formation in 1920. We are so grateful for that and for the continued support our bishops have provided over these many years. In your packets, you will find a brief history brochure that allows you to trace our outreach over time and demonstrates our fidelity to our mission, which is to work through our members to support, empower, and educate all Catholic women in spirituality, leadership, and service. NCCW programs respond with gospel values to meet the needs of our church and society in the modern world. Some of our most recent efforts include resources that address the new evangelization, domestic violence, passing our faith to the next generation, families fostering vocations, retreats and rosary reflections that address the dignity of women, as well as grief from loss through suicide, prayers for those addicted, faith formation guides through papal documents, advocacy efforts on issues of national concern, a national 5-part program that addresses human trafficking, and a pen pal program that links our Catholic school children in the U.S. with school children in the Holy Land. Many of our resources and prayers have been translated into Spanish. Our website, nccw.org, is updated constantly and provides much information about what National offers to our members around the country, keeping everyone current with council and church initiatives. The website also profiles our partners, such as CRS, with whom we have worked since 1946, and of course, the USCCB. Our international outreach includes an NCCW representative at the United Nations since the UN was founded, and membership on the board of the World Union of Catholic Women's Organizations since 1921. We are ever grateful for the guidance provided by our council spiritual advisors, who so graciously share their time and wisdom with us at every level of council: parish, deanery, diocese, province, and national. We hope that you are proud of what we have accomplished since the American bishops founded us in March 1920, and that you will be able to join us in Washington, D.C., August 26, 2020, as we celebrate our centennial with an opening mass at the Basilica. Thank you for your treasured support and for your kind attention. May our patroness, Our Lady of Good Counsel, ask her divine Son to bless you and your work with joy, wisdom, and peace. At this time, please enjoy a short video that will give a brief overview of the NCCW.
We are the National Council of Catholic Women, celebrating 100 years of spirituality, leadership, and service. Born from the vision of our bishops in 1920 to today, we have welcomed all Catholic women, faithful to the teachings of the Church, to join our ranks, to deepen spirituality, to become the women we were created to be, to carry on the vocation we were meant to have, to find strong bonds of sisterhood across our nation with women who share our faith. Since that day in 1920, hundreds of thousands of Catholic women have lived the NCCW mission to support, empower, and educate all Catholic women in spirituality, leadership, and service, with programs that respond with gospel values to the needs of the Church and society. We have learned leadership to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves, carrying an important and needed service to our nation and our world. We are proud of our legacy, of those first women who gathered at the request of the U.S. bishops and who traveled the country establishing councils of those women who led and served throughout the years, of all our members who see a need and work to fill it, see a wrong and work to right it, feel the call of the Spirit and seek to answer it. We continue to reach out across our nation in a strong, unified organization, rooted in the gospel message, our history and our mission, secure in the protection of our patroness, Our Lady of Good Counsel. We are the National Council of Catholic Women. Nurtured and grown by women of vision through decades of war and peace. Strong, faithful, courageous, loving women who work to strengthen spirituality, leadership, and service in all our sisters to bring our world closer to that desired by our Heavenly Father. For the past 100 years, we have been united in voice, united in faith, united in action. Moving forward, let us continue to bring God's hands, feet, and love to the world, bringing His presence to those who don't know Him, bringing His voice to speak for those with no voice. We thank God we are the National Council of Catholic Women.
Thank you, Bishop Parks. Thank you, Gene Kelly. We wish for a great centennial. We're at the end of this morning's session, and it is the last public moment I have to give thanks to some important people, I think, in the Conference of Bishops. I want to mention now John Galata, Executive Director of IT, Robert Yates, Director of Strategic Plan, Joyce Jones, our fearless Chief Financial Officer. I want to thank you all for the work that you've done. It's been a pleasure to serve. When I get to Jonathan Reyes, the Assistant General Secretary for Integral Human Development, he's going to be leaving us even as I leave as President. I'm glad he's doing something on evangelization. That's been his passion. I think it's beautiful he's doing it. And I'm really upset that he's leaving, but at the same time, we're delighted for Jonathan. He's done such good work for us. Evangelization is the key. I want to thank James Rogers, our Chief Communications Officers, and always attentive there when we have a public statement, always very helpful to me whenever I've called him, which I frequently in terms of certain things that go on. These past 3 years have been interesting, to say the least, and I have to give James Rogers credit for a very strong, but a very clear and serene help that he's given. To Assistant General Secretary Teresa Ritterhoff, you see her up here at times. She's really great. She's so responsive. Anthony Piccirillo, there's general secretary, also a lawyer. You know, almost all public statements that are done by anybody that go out, they have to come through me ultimately. And Anthony's right there, and with a phrase and all, he's very good, constant, very, very hard worker. Anthony, I will miss you and your work. To Monsignor Burrow and Monsignor Bransfield, I want to thank them both for their work. But in a special way, I want to thank Monsignor Bransfield. When you have to talk to somebody every day for the past 3 years at 7:45 in the morning, you get to understand that person, and you get to understand their commitment. People use the word passion today. I call it intense commitment that Monsignor Bransfield has to the work of this conference. You would be surprised when you see day in and day out. And I sometimes have called him, you know, at the most ridiculous hours, and he's always available to me. I cannot underestimate Monsignor Bransfield, how deeply indebted I am to him. So it's the part of the contact that I will miss, you know. I don't necessarily say I'll miss not being president, but I certainly will miss that contact, Monsignor Bransfield. And then there's your new president, Archbishop Gomez. He has been very, very much an active vice president. I have called on him on very important, significant times just to get a sense of his mind on things. He's been very supportive. He's very good. He's very helpful, speaks well at our inner meetings. So, Archbishop Gomez, I think you'll have an interesting time taking over as president. I really do. You've already got it. It's in Gama. And to all of you, the bishops, beginning with where we meet here all the time, to Archbishop Laurie. Thank you so much for the Archdiocese and how they come to our assistance every year at this meeting in November. Brother bishops, you've been very, very helpful. Speaking your mind, allowing me to think through things. I consider myself far more sensitive to the various regions of our country now than I ever was before. And you've been the reason for your kindness, your charity, and always your encouragement. So, to all of you, thank you very, very much. God bless you. We also have thanks to all the observers, guests, media who have been present here. As you know, we're coming to the end of the open session. And I think Archbishop Gomez has a prayer, but he may have something else before the prayer. So.
Thank you, Your Eminence. I also wanted to say a few words of thank you to you. Your Eminence, your years as president of this body have been challenging. And yet, under your leadership, we have also seen many signs of hope. I will especially mention the convocation of Catholic leaders, the fifth encuentro, and your commitment to accountability and the protection of minors, and many other initiatives to address the challenges of our people in current society. We are grateful that God chose you to lead us in this time. As you know, I like some words of St. Augustine that I think apply to your ministry, so let me say them again. St. Augustine once said, "To wisdom belongs the intellectual apprehension of things eternal. To knowledge, the rational apprehension of things temporal." Thank you for leading us with both knowledge and wisdom. On behalf of all of us, let me say thank you, and may God bless you for your excellent service to this body and to the church. Thank you very much.
You have some final things?
Thank you, Your Eminence. Your Eminences, Your Excellencies, the Bishops Emeriti are invited to meet at lunch today in Room 7, Grand Ballroom 7 on the 3rd floor. You'll pick up your lunch and then in line and then proceed into the ballroom, and I understand you'll be joined there by our Apostolic Nuncio. We will reconvene in executive session in this room at 2 p.m. Thank you, Eminence.
In the name of the Father, and Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
The angel of the Lord declared unto Mary,
She conceived of the Holy Spirit.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, blessed the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death.
Behold the handmaid of the Lord.
Be it done unto me according to thy word.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, blessed the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death.
And the Word was made flesh.
And dwelt among us.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, blessed the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death.
Pray for us, O Holy Mother of God,
that we may be made worthy of the promises of Christ.
Let us pray.
Wherefore, we beseech thee, O Lord, thy grace into our hearts, that we, to whom the incarnation of Christ thy Son was made known by the message of an angel, may by his passion and cross be brought to the glory of his resurrection through the same Christ our Lord.
Bless us, O Lord.
In these thy gifts, which we are about to receive, thy bounty, Christ our Lord. Amen.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Excellent. God bless you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
For you to remind me my name is spelled once again.